torpedo! We're hit! The situation is under control.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to World of Warships Blitz with Terry. Apologies again for the relatively scarce amount of videos recently. I am in the process of figuring out, well, how to live with my friendly new condition, and pacing is an interesting aspect of that. Basically, if I overexert myself, that can be just by going out a little bit too much, then I'm basically down for the count for the next 2 days, and that seriously gets in the way of video production. So while I'm figuring this out, things are being a bit more irregular. But we are getting finally to the thing that I already wanted to get to last week, and this is the Gdańsk, only original with the Austro-Hungarian flag, and I hope that'll be fixed soonish, but that's not what we're here for. This is obviously the Tier 10 of the new and upcoming pan-European destroyer tech tree. Well, I say destroyer, but they're really more scout cruisers at this point. Now, there isn't an awful lot of things to say about the Gdańsk. The only thing that really stands out from the little info box here is that they mentioned a Polish design for a crusader ship class. And I've tried this both on Polish sources, obviously with Translate because I don't speak any Polish, but the only thing I could find from a Polish naval designer in a crusader class was a heavy cruiser. So I'm not sure if Wargaming got this wrong, or if there was literally something that was never mentioned outside actually written literature in Polish, or anything else that I haven't gotten my hands on, but couldn't really find an awful lot of it. It would have been some form of a French design, just like the preceding things. And if you look at it, you can sort of see the pedigree where that comes from. Also, this is a very, very large destroyer. So if we compare that, for example, to the Halland, the Swedish Tier 10 the tech tree destroyer, which is significantly smaller. That's a monstrosity right here. So what can it do? And after the Lambros Cazzonis, is it worth going all the way to Tier 10? Because this is a scout cruiser. And scout cruisers can be quite interesting because they are not simple to play. And I'm going to say that just right away. It took me a while, and I had a couple of discussions actually with people who were extremely fond of this destroyer. And I've heard everything from this makes every other destroyer in the game obsolete, until this is a really, really, really good ship and probably the strongest destroyer in Tier 10. We'll check that conclusion and to where I ended up, but I've definitely tested this ship a lot more than I otherwise would have usually. First things first, let's compare her to the Halland and see how the two branches eventually diverge and end up with. The Gdańsk gets 4 engine boosts, she gets 3 smokes and 2 radars. Now the Halland gets radar as well, but the Gdańsk gets a radar 1. So this is a 7.2 kilometer range, whereas the Halland gets an 8.1 kilometer range radar. The Halland, obviously also being the sort of AA line, does not get a smoke, but in return gets the defense of AA3, which gives us a fair amount. And she gets an extra heal. And there's a unique equipment. Now that doesn't mean anything, that the Gdańsk doesn't have it yet. Unique equipment can be patched in later, and usually is patched in later. They don't usually come out with that. So that's something that comes in later, but we'll ignore that for now. Hull-wise, the Gdańsk has a a whole bunch more hit points, but otherwise a relatively sturdy hull for a destroyer. And this is generally a blessing and a curse. Well, it's a blessing in that you have a relatively sturdy hull for a destroyer. It's a curse in that it has the nasty habit of triggering armor-piercing shells to explode catastrophically in the middle of your ship, rather than harmlessly going through both sides and coming out the other end without blowing up everything in between. So I have had issues with battleship armor-piercing severely in the Gdańsk. And the Gdańsk is fast with a 40 knot base speed. Holland is a very pedestrian destroyer. But the maneuverability is most certainly inside cruiser level at this point. And given that this is a destroyer and you'd usually go for a concealment build, there's not an awful lot we're going to be able to do about the rudder shift. So maneuverability is not a strong point, and that is a very, very large target for a destroyer. She does get technically very the same guns as the French guns from the French design here. But we're comparing that to the Swedish Bofors on Holland. So obviously two different gun systems. But the Gdańsk gets 3 twins, so for 6 guns, and a single turret in the rear for a total of 7 of these French guns, compared to the Holland's twin Bofors. But if you look at the base reload, we have about half the base reload on the Holland that we have on the Gdańsk. So all in all, I'd say in terms of rate of fire, it's pretty much comparable between the two of them. Gdańsk has a slightly better range than the Holland, but Holland is a much smaller and better concealed target. The fire chance is a little higher, and obviously, given that these are 139 millimeters, the HE damage is also larger. The torpedoes, we get 2 quintuple launchers on both ships. The Gdańsk torpedoes do a little bit more damage, but have a significantly shorter range with just 8.1 kilometers, which for a tier 10, for a very large target, can be a bit of an issue. Otherwise, they are very, very much the same. So the same principle of low alpha damage, high flooding chance torpedoes. The AA is pretty much absent. I mean, it's not bad, 218 small caliber AA with a 2.7 kilometer range on the Gdańsk, but you're in tier 10, you're not going to shoot anything down. Whereas the Holland with the defensive AA is very much a swimming no-fly zone. And the surface detection is where it gets a little ridiculous, because the Gdańsk has a 7.7 kilometer base detection. That is firmly light cruiser level and pretty terrifying for a destroyer, especially one that isn't the most maneuverable ship out there as well. So the other destroyer that we do need to compare this to, that has similar characteristics, a large destroyer, destroyer leader, scout cruiser, however you want to call it, a very fast ship, engine boost based, and a terrible concealment, is the Kléber, the French tier 10 variant of the actual Mogador class. Obviously, the Kléber gets a better engine boost. So this is a 20% increase, whereas the Gdańsk has the 12% increase, so almost twice the increase. In return, while the Kléber gets the rapid reload, she doesn't get any smoke screens, other utility, or similar things. Now, Kléber is having a faster base speed and obviously the better engine boost. And Kléber is not known to be particularly maneuverable, but still better than Gdańsk. And she does get the same guns, although obviously she does get one more, but with a much, much longer base reload. Kléber is very much a burst fire ship. So the idea being that you try to trigger a Damacon on a, say, battleship or anything else, and you then go for it with the burst fire and try to set permafires. Or if you encounter an enemy destroyer, you switch on the burst fire and you put the hurt on. So they're relatively similar in terms of damage output. Same HE damage, same fire chance. Only that the Kléber obviously can use armor-piercing shells, whereas the Gdańsk cannot. That's not really a problem, because these HE shells hit relatively hard against destroyers and even against light cruisers at points if you're not firing at the main belt. The base range, however, on the Kléber is better, and the Kléber still is a more maneuverable ship. That said, the torpedoes have a shorter range on the Kleber. Kleber is not a torpedo boat. You're doing more of the run around very fast and drop torpedoes of opportunity. The thing is, the Kleber has the alpha strike on the torpedoes to really hurt, whereas the Gdańsk does not. So the Kleber can actually expect to kill things with torpedoes if she decides to get into torpedo range, whereas the Gdańsk very much relies on setting floods, either perma-floods or triggering damacons to then set fires. So she cannot expect to actually destroy things with torpedoes. The AA is even worse on the Kleber, but even the Kleber has a better surface detection than this thing. I mean, it's not great. So for playstyle wise, you're in a similar position that you are in a Kleber. You are a relatively large target. You have a terrifyingly bad concealment, but you are a very fast ship. Now the Kleber is faster and a bit more maneuverable than the Gdańsk. In terms of gunfire, Kleber has the range advantage. In terms of torpedoes, a bit shorter. In terms of utility, the Gdańsk certainly has the upper hand here because the radar smoke combo is quite potent against enemy destroyers. That said, we are starting to see a lot of radars out there. It's not just the Holland line, it's also this line now. So if you're encountering anything from either the original European line or from this line or from the Pan-Asian line in terms of destroyers, yeah, they can radar you right back and negate your smoke screen. The big problem with enemy destroyers is not so much that you can't win in a gunfight. This is a very potent destroyer, especially with the fast torpedoes. She can take on an enemy destroyer with the smoke radar combo without too much trouble, unless it's also having radar and smoke. The bigger problem is that you get spotted for the rest of the team, and a single salvo even from a battleship with armor piercing can make your life very, very short and very, very interesting for a short and brief period of time indeed. So, how are we setting this thing up? You can get additional HE damage and additional fire chance, or faster reload and traverse. I personally prefer the faster reload and traverse, but they're both not bad options to take here. Camo-wise, there are again two camouflages that you can choose from. You get the historical camo, which is very plain. You would barely notice it being absent if it wasn't for the slightly blue shade. But that said, blue ship on blue ground sounds like a relatively good camouflage to me, so not complaining here. It gives us much needed main battery range and torpedo range, because the range is a bit of a handicap on these ships. It gives us traverse speed and surface detection, which is also much appreciated. You can also get this Golden Age camo, which gives you hit points range and dispersion and traverse. I would probably go for the historical, because any kind of concealment you can scrape out is good, because you do need to steer quite wide from enemy ships. Not so much because enemy destroyers are super dangerous to you, more because they spot you and they outspot you by a fair margin, and they spot you for the rest of the enemy team oftentimes. So I'd be probably more going with the historical camo here, especially that this also gives us torpedo range. And the torpedo range is a bit on the short side. It is longer than the French torpedoes, but like I said, the difference being the French torpedoes are there to kill. The Gdańsk torpedoes very much are there to set floods in most cases. So you can, after you've torpedoed a battleship, expect to have a very angry flooding battleship looking back at you at a range where you're having a devil of a time actually avoiding the return fire. So especially if they're bringing friends around. So do be careful with these torpedoes. They are primarily gunboats, and it's also about the positional play again. Now that we've got that out of the way, I think I have the same equipment like I have on the Lambros Cazones with the main battery mod 1 for better traverse speed. And despite the fact that the concealment is relatively terrible, we really do need the concealment system here to get that down to any kind of workable levels. So with all of that, we are ending up with an over 6-second turn time. But once you actually got the rudder all the way around, she is relatively responsive to the rudder. We've got a 3.7 second reload on the guns with a workable 20 degrees of turret traverse, and we have a 9.8 kilometer range with the historical and an 8.4 kilometer torpedo range also with the historical camo for against a 6.6 kilometer surface detection after everything's been applied but before supplies. So workable, but a danger territory. Here's where the lack of historical camo actually really also comes into play. I'll show you two games, one without the historical camo and one with the historical camo, which gives us the extra gun range and torpedo range. No real surprises here. It's still, I'm using Jerzy, so we get the extra radar and we get the extra radar duration and cooldown, as well as the additional torpedo damage, which isn't a huge item here, but we'll take it. And the improved engine overload, obviously IFHE, because you can't fire armor-piercing shells, so use it. That'll be in the second round, however. So, I think I've been waffling on about the ship long enough. Let's get into some games, and then my conclusion of, is this the be-all and end-all of destroyers now and makes everything else obsolete, which I have heard a couple of times, or how else does this fit into the games in general? We'll start out with a 4v4. Don't let the amount of bots discourage you. I'm not going to be fighting the bots. We are facing Musashi, Minnesota, Jinan, and Ishimakaze on encounter. Now, how you would traditionally play, or how I would traditionally play something like a French destroyer, is I would be going for, well, using my speed, trying to get into interesting positions, mostly along the flanks, because these things don't like getting shot at in crossfires at all. You have difficulty disengaging and similar problems. And we're doing the same thing here. I mean, this is a bot carrier, so he's not going to scout, but I've got 4 engine boosts, so I may as well use it. And with the engine boost and preheating, she gets up to 47.5 knots, which is a very good speed. But as you can see, this is a very, very large ship. So usually I would, in a carrier game, I would try to get out of the initial scout from the carrier. But right now I'm just going to scout scout the side here. And while I am probably gonna I wouldn't even be certain that I can outspot the Jinan. I can certainly outspot these 2 battleships over there. So I am the only one on this flank here, and I'm in a perfect position for a destroyer, technically. Now, this is not with the historical camo build, so we have a relatively low range, which means I'm going to start smoking up and unload some high explosive at that unsuspecting Minnesota. And there is the enemy Jinan as well. So Jinan has deep water torpedoes, so they can't hit me, which means that I'm going to drop some torpedoes in the general direction here. And fortunately, the torpedoes are centerline mounted, so Jinan might be able to send torpedoes into the smoke screen, but he shouldn't bother because, you know, not an awful lot that's going to do. That said, I do have to be a little careful. There comes the armor piercing that I do dodge underneath, and especially with battleship armor piercing, that can hurt quite a lot more than you'd normally expect in a destroyer. But I do have to play at a relatively aggressive range in order to get within range of these ships. Now we've got a fire on the Minnesota, and he's not damage controlling it by the looks of it. So we'll just keep going. And as you can see, the high explosive, and this isn't even with the IFHE skill, the high explosive can actually get a surprising amount of full penetrations. Now, another fire on the Minnesota. Now, I do want to get myself into torpedo range and start making use of my torpedoes, but I have to keep dodging under the incoming fire. There's the Jinan on my right, so he's in a flanking position, which means I need to smoke up. But so far, I've managed to keep these 3 under lock here quite well. So while the Minnesota is burning, I am dropping at the Musashi because he's giving the better target. And Jinan is going to be just able to evade my torpedoes without too much of a problem. I didn't want to give the torpedoes away against the Musashi. There comes the flood. Obviously only one flood because we can only flood once, but the Musashi damage controls the flood. So now it's a matter of starting to unload at them. Now, with a Holland, I'd just be pretty much dancing here, or I would just go undetected and torpedo him again and stagger my torpedoes. Yep, and they have loaded the high explosive at this point. And there comes the Minnesota high explosive as well. I have the speed boost up. That's 1 perma on the Musashi. I've got the engine boost running. So in a French destroyer, you'd usually rely on your speed to keep you relatively safe from incoming fire. But there's also Jinan, so I do have to turn at some point. Oh, yeah, that was Musashi. I am definitely not as fast as I am in a French destroyer to completely avoid that. And it's just the sheer size of the thing as well. My smoke's almost ready, but I'm very low on hit points at this point. And just when I pop the smoke, Jinan actually manages to catch me. So you have to be extremely careful. And I do get a perma flood on the Musashi, so that Musashi is going to go down. There we go, Musashi's dead. But you do have to be extremely careful. But if you also do have to play aggressively, because you have to be in. You have to, especially without the historical camo. And Zhao just ran into all those. Oh, and commits suicide by Minnesota. You do have to be. You do have to be aggressive because if you are staying too far away, then you're not going to land any hits with your torpedoes, and landing hits with the guns can be trouble as well. So this is one of those ships where getting the extra range on torpedoes and guns is almost a must, in my opinion, especially if you are playing, and these Zhao torpedoes don't look bad. If Minnesota turns in to get his guns on target, Zhao is dead. Because he keeps firing. Oh, he survives on no hit, almost no health. Okay, that's a couple of Zhao torpedoes. Yeah, this is one of those ships where you almost have to get the historical camo for the extra range, because especially if you're playing on, say, the Asian server. I can't really speak for Europe because I don't play on that, but the Asian server has a okay, Vermont's committing suicide by Shima. What's Shima doing all the way back there? But he does take out the Jinan. Well done, Vermont. So. Smolensk is going to kill Shimakaze, but not before Shimakaze is going to kill Vermont. And there comes some Jinan torpedoes, I think, still. So that Vermont is going to die to actually Jinan torpedoes. So he gets himself a vengeance out of that. Yeah, especially if you're playing on the Asian server. Okay, people. All you have to do is not die. Smolensk, you have smoke up, please. That's a Minnesota. Especially if you're playing on, say, the Asian server, and games tend to be a lot more passive and a lot more at long range. And if you end up being, the vanguard, because the rest of the team goes, well, you're in a destroyer, you go ahead then. You go capture that capture circle. We are not going to move there. Then every bit of range that you can eke out is going to be worth it, and you've got to be really, really careful with return fire at these ranges that you're playing in, because it's a very large ship. It's well armored enough that armor piercing is going to hurt, and that said, you can do a reasonable amount of damage. So of course we're right back at encounter, and we are fighting a full team this time. We're up against Taiho, Monty, Colbert, Smolensk, Henri, Azuma, and a Z-52. Woohoo! Colbert, Smolensk, Henri, and an Azuma. Could be worse, could be Yoshino. At least we don't have to worry about torpedoes from that thing. So, just like with the French destroyers, the ideal position for these ships, or the ideal style that I would like to play, is to have the freedom to outflank the enemy team. And to get yourself into positions where you can either draw fire or where you can just HE spam and abuse your positioning. Unfortunately, not all games are working this way, because, someone is going to come down this flank, and you're not going to be in the comfortable position of just sitting somewhere where the enemy team isn't shooting and they're not looking at you, and you just get to farm. So first order of business, we have to get ourselves away from the carrier scout. Now, obviously, if the carrier is scouting the flank, then I'm going to have to use the first smoke, because there's no way in heck I'm going to be dodging torpedoes. And this is a Japanese carrier. I do not want to be hit by those torpedo bombers. But with the engine boost up, I have managed to get myself out of spotting range of the incoming carrier. And again, I am entirely alone on this flank. So I'm going to go ahead and scout. Fortunately, there's the Azuma. There's only the Z which can outspot me. The rest of the team cannot. No, the Colbert can outspot me as well, by the way. If he runs a concealment build, Colbert can outspot me, but he isn't, so he doesn't. And I'm running the historical camo. So we'll drop some torpedo onto Azuma. All they know is that they're being spotted. So at this point, I'm going to smoke up and start opening up at the Azuma. And the carrier calls out the Colbert. Colbert damage controls the single fire. So, okay, switching targets. We've landed 2 or 3 torpedoes on the Azuma. Unfortunately, no flood. But yeah, the Colbert has just been obliterated by the carrier. I have no idea why he was pushing so aggressively, but I can still use the outside of my smoke screen to deal with the Azuma. And Azuma doesn't have torpedoes, so I don't have to be too afraid. Plus, his damage control is on cooldown. So let's get that 5% fire chance to work and see if we can make something happen here. Now I do have to be careful because, again, huge target. Azuma is gonna have the... Yeah, there comes the high explosive. Oh, that could have been a lot worse. So already in reverse. And we'll see if we can... we'll see if we can push the Azuma a bit harder here. He is now alone. His friend, the Colbert, has succumbed. And I've got a Des Moines here coming with me, but the Des Moines is calling targets, so I'm gonna engine boost ahead again. Des Moines is angling against Azuma and whatever that is. Oh, it's a Smolensk. Yes, please, let's kill the Smolensk. Smolensk must kill. I'm gonna drop a smoke for the Des Moines here because he is taking return fire, and just curve that around. That should block him from. Azuma and Smolensk, and he can deal with incoming aircraft without too much trouble. Now, even with the historical camo on, I do have to be sort of in a dangerous at a dangerous distance, but. Ragnar is now joining the fun as well. We have killed Azuma. That just leaves Smolensk and Monty over there. Fortunately, that was HE, but that hurt. And there comes Montana shells, and there comes Smolensk again, and there comes the carrier. So I have definitely been too aggressive here. So I'm already going to reverse. Unfortunately, my smoke's on cooldown, so if the carrier goes for me, I'm dead. But it looks like, yep, he is going for me. Fortunately, I have backed off far enough that the Ragnar goes in and takes one for the team, and the Ragnar has a relatively decent AA, so most of these were, and there's a Smolensk as well. So thank you, Ragnar, for jumping in and taking it on. Carrier goes after the Ragnar. Ragnar is a floating anti-aircraft battery, so that is not happening. But that's the level of care you have to take when you are in this destroyer. If you expose yourself just a little bit too much, just like in real life, if you expose yourself a little bit too much, you get into big trouble. But now I've got the Ragnar on the left and the Des Moines on the right, so we are completely impervious to aircraft because this is Blitz and not PC. And we are actually shooting stuff down. Here comes the carrier again. Hasn't learned his lesson yet, has he? I mean, what's he going to do? We're coming for him. So he's got to do something about it. Unfortunately, well, that's a Ragnar, Des Moines, and myself. So no, you shall not be dropping bombs today or torpedoes. And he is actually going after the Ragnar. So... well, he's trying to overfly as little as possible. Well, none of these planes are going to come back. So we're going to finish off the carrier. Nope, we're not getting the Ruffle Stomp medal because the Z-52 has taken out the Napoli of all ships. How he has managed that, I don't know. But that is a dead Taiho, and I am getting shot at from the right. So I do have to be a little bit careful. I do have another smoke screen, however. But I'm already going to angle. And yeah, there is Montana, who is trying to salvage what can be salvaged, but nothing's going to be salvaged here. Not against Ragnar, Des Moines, and myself. So while the Taiho is burning down, we're going to go after the Monty. And I think Monty has resigned himself. Ow! These were Monty's secondaries, by the way, I think. So smoke up, Damacon the fires. I've got 10 torpedoes away with a 39% flooding chance. And I am trying to hit the stern section of the Monty for full pens with the high explosive. And 4 torpedoes, 10 torpedo hits, no flooding. Of course not, because why would you get? But yeah, that Montana is extremely dead. The Essex takes him out. That just leaves the Z. And now it's just a question if we're managing to cap first or if the Z gets killed first. So, is this the be-all, end-all, makes all other destroyers obsolete ship? No, it isn't. It's an interesting twist. It's an interesting hybrid between a Kleber and a Holland. It doesn't get much of in terms of AA. It's a massive ship. It takes huge amounts of chunk damage when it gets hit by either high explosive or armor piercing. It has cruiser maneuverability and cruiser surface detection, but it does get smokes. And if you can, you should absolutely get the historical camo for the ship for the extra range and the extra concealment, because that can save your bacon more times than you can count. You can play it very much the same way that you can play the French destroyers, which is positional HE spam. They're more gunboats, really. I would not be tempted to try and get the torpedoes on target if it means sacrificing the ship. You're not there to go after capture circles. You can rush caps because you're very fast, but then you have to vacate the capture circle again, because once you get spotted, it's not the enemy destroyers you have to be afraid of, because the radar smoke combo with fast torpedoes and very good guns means that you are quite dangerous against enemy destroyers. Still, just like in a French destroyer, I probably wouldn't get into a knife fight with something very agile, just because they can outmaneuver you quite well. The main purpose of this ship is long range HE spam, and more so than with the Swedish destroyers. Although the Swedes have an easier time with stealth torping, and obviously with the air defense. So if there's a carrier in there, you have to adjust your play very much. I think it's a good destroyer. It's an interesting play. I would say, if you are enjoying French destroyers, then this is the ship for you. If you are not a big fan of, if you tried ships like the Mogador or like the Kleber or like the Khabarovsk, and you're quite fond of them, then this is a ship for you. If you're more of the stealth torpedo, cap control sort of destroyer player, probably not the ship for you, because this is more like more on the cruiser side. And if in that regard, might not. If you don't like French destroyers, you're not going to enjoy this one either. So there's that. So I think it's a good balanced ship at the end. It's a fun ship to play. It can have very good results, but it is also RNG dependent, because you are relying on your fire damage and at the end of the day. And that's it for me today, and I will see you all next time. Bye bye.